All right, everybody. A little bit late or a lot late, depending on how you're looking at it. But we're going to wrap up our look at some of the top college players from the most recent week of college football. Just clearing it out of the way before we get to more college football tomorrow. And nobody really cares about what happened in week 6 anymore, right? So we're doing the defense, and it's not a great week in some areas. There's definitely some cool stuff going on out there, but. I don't know. It's once you get to the bye weeks where every week you've got at least two or three top teams and some other decent teams that are on a bye week, it's kind of hard. So we'll do what we can here. We got a decent list. Let's start at nose tackle. Kenneth Grant, even though Michigan lost to Washington, I thought played pretty well. 4 tackles, one for loss, one QB pressure. Washington ran for 114 yards, but only 3.3 yards a carry. So when you look at Kenneth Grant, he's still spending, I don't know, 35 to 40% of his snaps in the A gap as a pure nose. Um, you got to say he's doing his job there. 27 points allowed, 75.5 PFF score, doing his thing. Tyleik Williams back in action this week for Ohio State. He had a good game. It's kind of a quintessential nose tackle game, right? You don't put up the monster numbers, but you're doing your job. Ohio State wins easily, only allows 7 points to Iowa. Tyleik Williams, 2 tackles, 1 pressure, 4.3 yards per carry, 86.6 on the PFF. And Nazir Stackhouse. And get used to seeing these three names. These three guys and Dante Corleone are like your axis of power for nose tackles this year. 1 tackle, 1 pressure, 137 rushing yards allowed, which was 4.4 yards a carry by Georgia. 13 points allowed, 71.1. I mean, it's good stuff, right? And Stackhouse is the guy who's going to go at a reasonable draft slot. Grant is probably going to be a first round pick. Tyleik might be a first round pick, although I don't think he will be. Excuse me. Yeah. Stackhouse is probably going to be like a third rounder at best. So to me, that's maybe even more interesting just because of that. Okay, edge rushers. This is the one area where I think we got some really top level play. Generally speaking, I think that as long as you're really thorough and you really are willing to look around, you're going to find a lot of good edge rushers pretty much every week because we're starting to get into the swing of things here where especially the top guys are just, they're going off. They're really starting to blow up here. So we got currently the top guy in this draft, James Pierce Jr., leading us off here. Really good game he played for the Volunteers despite the loss. 9 tackles, 2 for loss, 1 sack, 7 total pressures in a game that was relatively low scoring, so it's not like Arkansas was dropping back to pass 80 times. 1 pass batted down, 297 passing yards allowed by the Tennessee defense, so that's not what you're really looking for. 9.9 yards per pass. Only 19 points, though, so hard for me to buy the fact that Tennessee was responsible for the loss. 73.7 PFF. We also got Jack Sawyer here, the other Ohio State edge here. He had a nice little game for the Buckeyes. 3 tackles, 1.5 tackles for loss. All of those tackles for loss, by the way, were sacks, so 1.5 sacks. 5 pressures. Ohio State only allowed 5.2 yards per passing play for a total of 110 yards. 7 points. 89.2 PFF grade. So really, really sterling stuff from Jack Sawyer. He's going to flirt with the first round, I think. Sorry, guys, can't shake it. Landon Jackson of Arkansas, another guy to shout out here. He was very, very disruptive in the backfield this week for Arkansas in their big upset win over Tennessee. 4 tackles, including the half a sack. 7 QB pressures. So that's how you stymie a Tennessee passing attack that had looked pretty unstoppable early in the season. You live in the backfield. Only allowed 158 passing yards, 5.2 yards per pass. 14 points, 75.2 PFF grade for Jackson. He is consistently landing in my top performers list, it feels like. New name here. This is a new one. We haven't talked about him yet this year. Donovan Iziruaku. And with a last name like that, Honestly, I would not mind if he didn't come up again. But if he's going to play like this, you got to shout him out, right? Boston College, 10 tackles, 2 for loss, including the 1 sack. 9 QB pressures, which is insane. I mean, that's Nick Bosa numbers. That's Aiden Hutchinson numbers. Good Lord. Getting worse. 218 passing yards, so 7.8 yards per passing play. Boston College, by the way, lost this game, which that's rough. You live in the backfield to this degree, and you can't even get the win. 24 points allowed, 81.8 PFF score. Really good game. And another Michigan defender. It's kind of weird how many Michigan defenders I'm putting up here when Michigan didn't play that great on defense and lost the game. But Josiah Stewart, I really like this guy. He had another good game against UW. 4 tackles, 2 for loss, including a sack, 4 pressures. Only allowed 215 passing yards, 9.5 yards per pass. 27 points, but a 90.2 PFF grade. So there's a lot to say positive about Josiah Stewart over at Michigan. He's becoming one of my favorites in this draft, and he's somebody that I could definitely see the Seahawks taking a serious pass at because he's probably a day 3 guy. Maybe day 2, probably day 3. It's not going to be a big investment, but I really like him. Linebackers this week were kind of weak. I'm just going to be honest. I only found 3 that I thought stood out in any way, shape, or form. And one of them was, it's kind of thin. Ooh, I am struggling tonight, people. Barrett Carter of Clemson was one of the guys who stood out to me. 10 tackles, 1 for loss, a sack. 1 pass defensed as well. Only 22 rushing yards allowed by Clemson. Only allowed 13 points. 67 PFF grade. I liked what Barrett Carter was doing out there. He continues to be, at this point, probably the top linebacker in the draft because of the Harold injury. But Carter, really, really like what he's showing so far this year. Jay Higgins of Iowa was the other standout for me. 14 tackles, trying everything he could to keep Iowa in the game against Ohio State. It didn't work out, but he had a sack as well. He recovered a fumble. Ohio State eventually won the battle. They eventually got over 200 rushing yards and 35 points, but Jay Higgins tried to hold the line. 82.1 PFF score. Jay Sean Barnum rounds us out here. He was the only other linebacker that I saw that I thought did anything notable. 6 tackles for the Wolverines, 2 quarterback pressures, and only 114 rushing yards. So really, Michigan's defense did a fairly good job stopping the run. 3.3 yards a carry is going to work. But yeah, 70.9 PFF score, pretty good. So linebackers, it's not going to be a good crop, which is unfortunate because we could use some. But there's probably going to be at least a couple good guys. You just got to identify them and actually take them. Finally, defensive backs, and I believe this week we're kind of doing all safeties, except for maybe Sonny Styles. I think OSU has him playing linebacker a little bit, but hey, that's not bad either, right? If he ends up a linebacker in the NFL, I mean, we could use a linebacker, so there's nothing wrong with that. But anyway, Malachi Starks of Georgia, first standout for me. Georgia bounce back game. 6 tackles, 1 QB pressure. Didn't allow anything in coverage. Only 200 passing yards total allowed by Georgia, 7.4 yards per pass, 68.1 PFF score. He's still the top dog in this safety class, it looks like, and I don't think that's going to change. Nick Amenwari, haven't mentioned him in a couple weeks, but he is also still a really fun player and somebody who may end up in the first round. South Carolina, 5 tackles and a pass deflection, didn't allow anything in coverage, and I think he got targeted 4 times. They did allow a lot of passing yards in South Carolina this week, 285, 10.6 yards per play, 27 points, but hard for me to put it on Amenwari at all. 66.3 PFF score. Sonny Styles, who I mentioned a minute ago, Ohio State, 7 tackles, 2 for loss, and a QB pressure. 18 receiving yards allowed in this game on, I think it was 4 targets. Ohio State's defense pretty shut down. 110 passing yards allowed, 7 points, 5.2 yards per pass, 73 PFF. So he's making some waves here. I don't know if he's a safety or a linebacker at the next level, but either way we could use him probably. Sebastian Castro of Iowa, another Iowa defender, I thought stood out positively. One of his best games of the year so far in a losing effort. 6 tackles, 1 for loss, a pick, 1 QB pressure, allowed 22 receiving yards on like 4 targets, only 209 passing yards allowed total by Iowa's defense, 8.4 yards per pass. Not great, but hard to argue that Sebastian Castro didn't do his job. 79 PFF score, by the way. I'd call that doing your job. And it was kind of hard to find another one, but Keon Saab of Alabama, in what was a pretty bad effort by Alabama's defense, I think he played pretty well. 9 tackles as a safety, allowed nothing in coverage. Didn't feel like he was part of the problem. 65 PFF grade, not great or anything, but on a defensive performance like that, like what we saw in Alabama's last game, it's hard to score all that well, right? When you give up 40 points to Vanderbilt, things are going to happen. All right, so that's it for this week for me. Let me know what you guys think, if you guys think anything at all. I wish I had better news about these linebackers, but man, it's just not a position that gets the blue chippers the way it used to, I feel like. It's becoming a devalued position, and maybe the pendulum swings back at some point, but right now it's hard to find guys to really get into. All right, guys. I'm going to get this video up later than I usually do, but it's what you got to do sometimes when you're playing Thursday Night Football. All right. See you guys later. Go Hawks.